Uber has taken over. In the Western world, it's become the go-to method of private transportation. It's also become a popular way to earn a bit of extra money on the side, or in some cases, has become people's sole form of income. Millions of people have now signed up to the platform to become drivers. But is it worth it? Well, I don't think so. In this video, I'm going to let you know exactly why being an Uber driver sucks, but rather than being an Uber totally sucks and stuff video, I will also tell you situations where it's not so bad. I'll focus mainly on Uber in Australia, but you can still apply several points to other countries. As of November 2017, I've completed over 3,000 trips with a current 500 trip rating at 4.81. I've been driving for almost 2 years now and can safely say that overall, it pretty much sucks. There are certainly good reasons for signing up as a driver, but the vast majority of people shouldn't consider it as an option, especially in Australia. When I first signed up with Uber in early 2016, $30 an hour in gross income to me was standard. After fuel expenses, this works out to about $25 an hour. You then need to take out depreciation and other costs. In terms of hourly, they aren't huge, but they do add up and become significant over time. That was back then. These days, there are a lot more drivers and the gross hourly has dropped significantly during all but the busiest of times of the week. Now, if you drive more than 20 hours per week, you're unlikely to net yourself more than $20 an hour, and that's before you take into account depreciation, which is a significant cost in the long run, as mentioned. I even take an 80% share of gross fares, but last I checked, new drivers only get 75%. If you want to work reasonable hours, or even just evenings on weekdays, you won't make much more than minimum wage after all costs, if you even make minimum wage at all. You also need to pay your registration and insurance, but these are deductible costs in Australia, and you need to pay them whether you generate an income or not. If you are intelligent and coordinated enough to drive a car, whilst taking directions and being friendly with your service, you can almost certainly get a job in retail or some other hospitality role that earns more. Despite this, when faced with a big increase in taxes on Uber rides, the entire cost was passed on to the drivers. After losing a court case over whether or not ride-sharing was a taxi service, thus subject to goods and services tax in Australia, drivers were forced to pay 10% of their gross income to the Australian Tax Office. I already pointed out that drivers make very little, but instead of raising prices to cover the additional 10%, Uber forced drivers to incur the entire cost. Not only are drivers expected to take this cost out of their own pocket, we need to either pay a tax accountant to file a quarterly business activity statement or do all the administration ourselves. I'm not a tax accountant, but can someone please tell me why Uber couldn't have set up a GST registered business in Australia, raised prices by 10% and paid it on behalf of all drivers? The ATO get their cut, the taxi industry gets their win, and drivers are unaffected so we can all move on. As noted, prices were eventually raised to cover the costs, but admin help would have been great. The result has been a massive drop in service standards and also a large number of drivers dropping out of the market. When I first started using Uber as a passenger, I rated every single driver 5 stars. The service was just that good. The car was usually clean and the driver was often friendly and talkative. Out of the last 10 drivers I've had, only half of them have I rated 5 stars. They are either rude, don't know what they are doing, don't speak English, or drive like maniacs. I had one driver go through not 1, but 2 red lights on a 10-minute journey. What does Uber expect? You pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Finally, they still don't allow tips in Australia. Despite earning barely anything during all but the peak times, passengers are still unable to reward good service unless they have cash available and the inclination to do so. People in Australia rarely tip unless prompted, and it's rude for the receiver to ask directly. A couple of extra dollars per trip would make all the difference, yet it's not allowed. But what about the good reasons to drive Uber? We've discussed the bad things, but there must be a reason I've done so many trips. It's obviously not that bad, right? Well, there certainly are some redeeming aspects. In my view, there are 3. The first one being flexibility. If being able to choose when you work is more important than earning a decent living, then Uber is certainly a good compromise. Provided you already own the car, that is. You don't make much money, but at least you can decide not to work if you don't want to. The second reason you should consider driving for Uber is if you already have a GST registered business. That way, driving for Uber doesn't place that much of an administrative burden on you. You could always drive those 5 to 10 hours a week during peak times, and it will be exactly what the system was designed to be. A way to earn extra cash in your spare time. The third reason you might want to sign up to be an Uber driver is you like talking to people and you like meeting new people as well. Let's ignore the sexual harassment and rape cases committed by a very tiny minority of losers that have plagued this kind of service for decades now and focus on the common reality. Uber is actually a good way to meet people. I recently joined a five-a-side soccer team through it and have met plenty of beautiful women that I may have pursued if I was single. Granted, the odds of a passenger being an attractive woman who is also single that you connect with is low, but the more trips you do, the more likely this is going to happen. Just don't be a rapist. Flirting and compliments are fine, but assaulting them while they're passed out on your back seat is not. This should be obvious, but if it isn't, seek help. I will add there could be a benefit to having GST registration knock a number of drivers out of the market. When you are forced to register for GST, you are signing up to additional administrative work. For many, this could seem too much of a hassle or too expensive. Knocking drivers out of the market this way means more of that wonderful thing called price surging that every driver just loves. Seriously, it's awesome. But that adds variance to your income and not many people like paying it either. Uber the company does have some redeeming features, and they do offer good service for driver issues. I recently had a problem with a very big fare and they solved it within a few days. The wait time did leave me wondering, but ultimately they came through. In general, they tend to respond quickly to driver issues and are constantly updating the app with new features to improve the experience, such as setting a destination, which means you only get trips that are only going to take you where you want to go. Uber, in and of itself, is a brilliant idea, and fundamentally I have no moral issue with drivers earning less than minimum wage. We can always find alternative work if we really need to. The problem with drivers earning so little means the least competent individuals flock to it and everyone else finds better work. With the regulatory burden as it is in Australia, there isn't even any point being a casual driver who picks up people on the way to and from work. Why would any sane person sign up to making quarterly tax returns to earn a few measly dollars? Thankfully, as low earnings do push people out of the system, supply drops and prices tend to rise through things like surge pricing. I also do need to give them kudos for eventually raising the price of fares to cover the cost of GST. It still isn't worth it to drive casually, but those of us who drive for a job make a little bit more. I should also mention that along with the price rise, Uber decided to take an additional 2% of drivers' income, so it will cost the passenger more, but the driver pay doesn't go up as much as it needed to. So if you need flexibility above all else and are happy earning peanuts for several weeks at a time, feel free to sign up. However, odds are you are smart and competent enough to earn more elsewhere. Happy driving. Hi guys, thanks for watching my video. I hope you got something out of it. If you had any questions or wanted to know anything about Uber or just wanted to add something to the discussion, please feel free to leave a comment. Leave a like as well if you enjoyed the video, and also subscribe for more. Feel free to go and check out all my other stuff if you want to first. And hopefully I'll see you next time.